I felt like I should be in a park somewhere. That was just lovely. Didn't you? You just watching the clouds go by and just feeling in the breeze. By the way, the breeze is gorgeous out, right? Beautiful. Thank you for that. Also made me think, too, about, it really is up to us. Perspective, the world shifting, it's up to us. But not me alone. It was never up to me alone. And that's kind of the challenge, I think, being humans, especially in our Western culture, is how often do we think we look at the big task and we think, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? So today's talk, Me, Myself, and I, and this whole month at CSL's is about relationship. The ones we have with ourselves, we start with this week. And it's upon this relationship with myself that all relationships are built upon, which is both exciting and really frustrating. Why is that? Why is it that relationships are so important? And that's what we are as humans. That's everything about us, who we are. It's how we see the world. I imagine, and just think for just a moment, I bet 99% of the time that you are frustrated or sad or whatever it might be, it's a relationship. Right? And when we choose, we have these opportunities to make these choices about how we see ourselves, which does impact and influence all relationships that we have. Do we choose self-love? Do we choose self-hatred? How often do we invalidate our worth? Now, so let me just ask this question first. Who am I? Who are you? And by the way, this is a question for you to answer out loud, by the way. This is that interactive part of the service that you never have. Who am I? Speak out loud. Say that again?
I am an individualized expression of God.
Okay. That's the practitioner answer. Love it.
I am the unique and unrepeated way that God expresses on this planet for me.
There's the soon-to-be practitioner way.
I am a child of God.
There's a really simple one right there. I'm an adult of God. Sometimes I am. And, okay, so that's what we intellectually know. Who do I really believe I am?
It depends.
Depends, doesn't it?
Like I said, sometimes I'm the victim and sometimes the victor.
Sometimes you're the victim, sometimes you're the victor.
I am my experiences.
You're your experiences, yes. So if I'm an individualized expression of God, I'm a child of God, or whatever choice that I made here, let's talk about what we really believe. When I talk to myself about myself, what do I say? And then there was silence.
Too much guilt.
Too much what? Guilt?
Why did I do that?
Why did I do that? Why didn't I do that? I love myself.
I could have, would have, should have.
I coulda, woulda, shoulda. Now, the important part about this, too, is if I don't admit to what I truly believe, I cannot change it because I continue to lie to myself and I say the right thing. I say the thing that's acceptable. Don't I? These pants make my butt look big. My hair just didn't work out today. What's that big thing in my forehead? I'm so clumsy. I'm such a fool. Will I ever learn? You have no business eating that extra piece of cake. Yes, you do. A number of years ago, when I first met and started dating my spouse, Janine, there was kind of a little bit of a challenge there, and the challenge was that she had a 3.5-year-old. Now, I'm not saying 3.5-year-olds aren't challenges, because they are, right? I mean, seriously, they're dangerous. I realized that some of the ways in which I was behaving at the time might not be conducive to hanging out with a 3.5-year-old. So Lent came up. It was around the time of Lent. And by the way, I'm not Catholic, never been Catholic, but I love to take on other spiritual traditions anytime I can. So I decided for Lent that I was going to give up 2 things. One was chocolate, and the other one was my favorite word that you should not use around a 3.5-year-old. And I was using it a lot. I had a really good friend who used it for a noun and a verb and an adjective. You can imagine what that word probably was. Sometimes that word's the only word I can use when I am just really frustrated and angry. So for Lent, I decided to give up the word and chocolate. Janine thought I was crazy and funny. So as I walked through Lent, and as I was giving up my favorite word of profanity, and I was giving up chocolate at the end of Lent, chocolate was much easier. But it was also necessary for me to be very conscious, because as we know, 3.5-year-olds will repeat back to you everything that you don't want them to repeat back to you. And that was really important. What's interesting about Reese, she's now 17. She's a senior this year. She doesn't use any profanity. I'm sure it has nothing to do with me personally. I really don't think it is. I think there's something within her that speaks about when she wants to speak, she's very careful about the words she chooses. And I think sometimes in culture, we're not. We're careless. We're careless about what we say about ourselves. We're careless about what we say about others. And that's often because we're not necessarily very present. So when I talk about myself, do the words I speak about myself, do they inspire or depress? And we know this. This is not new, right? If it's new, let me know. It's not new. This is what we practice in this philosophy we call science of mind. We don't own that, by the way. It's just what we practice, and it's what we've chosen to practice. What's really interesting about what we practice is when we say things that do not speak well of our worth, it's because we've forgotten who we are. Now, I would say we've probably forgotten who we are since we were about 3.5. Because we get caught up in culture and we get caught up in busyness. So it's a re-education. You're back in this room learning who you should be again at 3.5. Because we've forgotten. What's interesting is a metaphor to consider is you've heard that we are both the wave of the ocean, right? When we think of oneness, the wave is not separate from the ocean. It's part of it. It has everything within the ocean, within the wave. So imagine we're a wave, you're a wave. So for just a moment, think about that. When I'm separate, I think that I'm a wave separate from the ocean, and I look around at the other waves and I get really scared. Some are bigger, some are darker, some have a lot of white water, and I forget. I forget that I'm not separate from all the other waves, that I'm not separate from the ocean. And yet when I'm separate, how can I not be terrified of all those other waves when I believe I'm separate? It makes perfect sense. When fear comes up, I have forgotten that I am part of it all. And that there's something evolving and moving, not only as me, but everyone that I travel with. And the part that gets muddy in my experience is, and sort of what Gary Simmons said, is that what you read, Gary Simmons? And most every other mystic or philosopher is the fact that, we all came here by divine appointment. Some of us believe that, some of us don't. We all came here with a unique personality, which we would call the individualized expression of God. We came here with families. We came here in a particular body. We came here as a particular representation of gender. We came here with differing sexual orientations. We came here with varying colors of skin. We came here with all of this as an individualized expression. And there are events that happen in our lives along the way that oftentimes we wonder why. Why did that person die? Why did I lose that job? Why did I lose that house? Why do I feel like the way I do? All these events that show up, and the first thing we go, because that's what we're taught to do, is that 1, I did something wrong. 2, you did something wrong. 3, the world did something wrong. But it's always about that an event or situation or circumstance, not always, but often is, why did this happen to me? And yet there is a belief that every event or situation that happens, not that we call forth every event and situation, by the way, not even in my own life. Sometimes you make choices that affect me. It's true. We're all making choices in this big pot, and it's affecting each other, and then I make choices about myself. Our mental and emotional selves benefit when we nourish them with love and empathy and compassion around all the events that happen in our lives. When we don't, then we're the wave that's afraid of all the other waves. This last year, and I've mentioned this here, I had 2 brothers that died within 30 days. One on December 16th, the next one on January 16th. Seems like a lot, doesn't it? And it is. Interestingly, 11 years ago, my mother and grandmother left at the same time, too. It seems my family likes to depart the planet in 2s. There might be an arc in my family somewhere. I'm going to have to check that out. When my brothers left, I think what's most surprising when I express this is I was glad. I was actually relieved. I had joy that they had left because their lives were pretty traumatic. And they were suffering, and there was a lot of pain associated in their lives. One was addiction, the other was mental health. I found it interesting they chose to go together, kind of. They were really connected. Since that time, what I found is what's come up in my own grief. And when I say grief, it was the grief, for me, grief was not understanding what was coming up for me. I couldn't label it or characterize it. We so want to know, don't we? And one of the things that came up in this situation, we had a pretty traumatic childhood, and these 2 just couldn't recover, truly. That was a big part of it. And that every time something happens in a family, it produces an effect. And there's an invitation every time we lose somebody, every time there's an event that we struggle with. And the invitation is, what is coming up for me to heal? And I've been spending time with this because in some situations, similarly to actually when my mother and grandmother passed, I was also relieved. Isn't that interesting? They were both struggling in different ways. One of the things that came up for me in this situation was that these 2 had affected a change in me with the remaining family members that are here on the planet enjoying the bodies that we have. And I realized that I was not being authentically me, in my relationship with my family. Now, I'm the oldest, the most responsible. I mean that, actually. The most compliant. Perfection has always been something I struggle with. And so what I realized is that in conversations with my family, through that process of grief and getting ready for a memorial, that, how do you do 2? in situations that are traumatic, that I was not really being authentic in how I talked about my own pain. That within my family structure, when someone said something or did something that I felt pain from, I always thought, I'll just take the higher road and know that it's not personal, which it wasn't, has nothing to do with me, but at the same time, I was not allowing myself to express some truth in a compassionate and empathetic way that was of benefit to both myself and the other family member. I was hiding. And I thought I was taking the higher road, but what I was really doing was not being rejected. I was pre-planning not being rejected. Does anybody do that? None of you do you? I was not expressing my truth in that moment, which I think expressing your truth, and I'm careful when I say this, when someone says I need to share my truth, I don't necessarily like that when someone says that, because I know I'm about to just get an earful. But when I'm expressing my truth from a place of empathy and compassion and love for myself and others, what comes out is absolutely healing. But it has to come from that place. It cannot come from anger and resentment and frustration and hurt. It cannot come from a place where I'm judging the other just as harshly, honestly, as I'm judging myself. What's really interesting about this time with respect to what I've said, which is what I say to myself is what I really believe about myself. What I say of myself is what I believe about the universe. It doesn't matter what you think you know. It's what do you say to yourself in those moments when you are challenged or hurt or frustrated. What do you say to yourself? What do you say to yourself about yourself? What do you say to yourself about another? Last time I was here, I was talking about this idea of evil and how we generalize and stick everything under evil that we don't like. We do the same for ourselves when I don't understand or when I don't understand another. I generalize and label and characterize. One of the reasons we come into spiritual community is so we can learn how to be with one another, so we can learn how to love one another and be supported in that loving one another. The question is, are we reaching out other than, and I'm saying this, are we reaching out other than just coming here on Sunday or being on Facebook Live? Are we doing anything other than that? Reading a book, watching listening to a podcast, watching a YouTube. Are we doing anything really in practice? And I got to tell you, through the pandemic, was it hard? We were sitting back most of the time, recipients and receivers of messages, not necessarily with an opportunity to engage in practice. But boy, were we practicing. We were not maybe practicing here, but we were practicing everywhere else. We were practicing while we were watching the news. Did it get really quiet all of a sudden? We were practicing whenever we saw someone do something that disturbed us, or angered us, or frustrated us. That's when we were practicing. As we're coming back together in community again, there's an opportunity, and I said this before with Seal Beach, you are in one of those places where the potential and possibility is so extreme, is so infinite, that you get to choose how you want to be in community and with each other. You get to choose whether you want to step in and commit. You get to choose whether you want to support each other, because when I'm supporting another, I'm learning about myself. When I'm in classes, when I'm doing workshops, when I'm taking the time, we do a little bit that at the beginning of service, saying hi to one another. When I take the time and I reach out to someone that I do not know, because man, that's risky. When I take the time to notice that someone else might be struggling, and I step in and risk having to do something to care to empathize, to love. Everything I do matters for myself. What I practice on the outside feeds me on the inside. And we do this thing together. You know, Ernest said in Science of Mind, he said, since our spiritual understanding is not sufficient to enable us to mentally set bones, we call in a surgeon. Since we cannot walk on the water, we take a boat. We can go only as far as our spiritual knowledge takes us. Principle is infinite, but we shall demonstrate its power only at the level of our concept of it. It's why we get together. It's why we do this. It's why the community serves and supports the me, myself, and I. I find it interesting that CSL called it the me, myself, and I, because those are three absolutely distinct parts of me. There's the part of me that is conscious. There's the part of me that is completely unconscious. And there's the part of me that's part of everything. They're not separate, but they're still individualized. And the opportunity exists when I walk in these doors to do more than just sit and receive a message, to actually practice something that touches me and says, you know what, I should do that in my life. I should step out a little bit more in my life. I should serve. I should just walk up to someone and say, hi, how are you? And really mean it. He goes on to say, people say, I can't take off my glasses. Then wear them. How simple is that? But begin to make the declaration that there's one perfect vision seen through you. This is the truth. We have an opportunity every time we put on those spiritual glasses, which to me is community. Community are the glasses that help us to grow and to be a greater idea within me that knows of myself. So what am I really? And what are others that are not me? We're here to be explorers in life, adventurers, pioneers, to evolve, to emerge, and do all that in a culture that is held up by paradox. And that paradox is we are divine and we live like we're not. Matthew Fox said, I am that I am, illustrates our own divinity. I am is in every creature, atom, galaxy, flower, fish, and human. Our lives are stories about how our I amness came to be, how it flowers into a unique and beautiful expression of the Divine One, the image of God that comes to birth once in a universe in us. Nice. I could stop there, but I thought I would pray. So let me ask this question of you before I pray, which is, how do you want to do this? What is the word for you that speaks to what you want to be, that you know of yourself to be? And don't be quiet about it, because, if you're quiet about it, it isn't going to happen. What's the I am? Love. Kind. Whole. Fear? Did you say fear?
Yes.
Okay. Fear? Say it. Sloppy. Is that what you want to be? That's what you are? What do you want to be? Clean. What do you want to be? Truth. Mindful. Happy. Joyful. What are you doing to be those things right now? Hold that. You're here, aren't you? You showed up for you. Exactly. So let us hold that. Start there. So just gently close your eyes if you're comfortable. And let us just see that wave that you are in that beautiful Pacific Ocean. That's only the Pacific because it's on this side of the planet. Because that ocean covers the entire planet in places. It moves and travels to all places. It's part of everything. It has within it a universe. That wave that is us, that wave that is me, has everything in the universe already within it to be the wave, to be in the ocean, to be part of the ocean. For that is what oneness is. There's nothing that I need. I take that word that I spoke, whether it's wholeness, mindfulness, love, compassion, empathy, clean. I take those words right here and right now. I not only hold them for myself, now open your eyes and look around the room, but I hold every word that was spoken in this room, knowing that collectively the power is in the us, just as much as it's in the me. So in knowing that, I just bless each word spoken. It's divine nature, that which rose up from the soul and said, speak. And I call it good and very good. And so it is. Amen.